Imagine being crowned at 13 and riding to war at 16, yet you cannot feel the reins in your hands. Under polished silver gauntlets your skin is dying, nerve by nerve, and you only notice because the leather slips. On the horizon a brown storm rises, and then the storm begins to glitter. It is not weather. It is Saladin's army, and in minutes it will either swallow you or break. His name is Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, the Leper King, and the battle you are about to witness is Montgisard, fought on November 25, 1177. Chroniclers describe a handful of Frankish knights slamming into a much larger host and sending it into chaos. Stay with this story to the end, because the victory is only half the horror. The other half is what it cost a boy whose body was already betraying him. If you like history when it feels like a thriller, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It still amazes me that we can stand together on the same battlefield in our imaginations, separated by oceans, connected by curiosity. Now strip away the paintings and movie masks. The real Baldwin was not a tragic prop. He was a king trying to rule while he decayed. Leprosy in the 12th century was more than illness. It was stigma, fear, and theology tangled together. The disease damages nerves, leaving victims numb to injuries that turn into infections, disfigurement, and sometimes blindness. William of Tyre, Baldwin's tutor and later historian, wrote that the boy felt no pain even when other children pinched and scratched him. William of Tyre, Historia. From childhood he lived on borrowed time, waking each day less certain of what his own body was doing. By 1177, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was a fragile island. 4 decades it survived because its enemies were divided, but that era was ending. Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, or Saladin, had welded Egypt and Syria into a single power, with money, manpower, and a religious mandate to reclaim Jerusalem. Contemporary Muslim and Latin sources alike present him as disciplined, patient, and frighteningly capable. Ibn al-Athir, Al-Kamil, William of Tyre, Historia. Against him stood a teenage king who could barely hold a sword. Saladin saw an opening. Much of the Crusader field army was campaigning in the north, and the south lay exposed. He crossed the border with a major host. Numbers vary by source, but the imbalance was undeniable, and he let his troops spread out to raid, burn, and forage. Smoke rose from villages, refugees clogged the roads, and the garrisons looked empty. Baldwin's advisors urged him to stay inside Ascalon's walls and wait for help. On paper, that was wisdom. In reality, it meant watching Jerusalem die. So Baldwin did the unthinkable. He rode out. Servants tied the reins to his wrists because his hands could not trust themselves. He scraped together perhaps 500 knights, plus supporting troops, and he brought the holiest symbol his kingdom possessed, the relic believed to be the true cross, carried by clergy to steady shaking hearts, Ernul Chronicle, William of Tyre. It was not strategy in the modern sense. It was a wager of faith, speed, and audacity. Hit the giant before the giant remembered to put on armor. Saladin, confident, left only a thin screen to watch Ascalon and marched north. That screen cracked. Baldwin's column burst free and raced along the coast, chasing the dust cloud of an army that thought the war was already won. Near Montgisard, by the wadi and rolling ground around Tel el Jaiza, the Ayyubid host was stretched out, cluttered with plunder and baggage. Some men were dismounted, some had loosened gear in the heat. Then came a sound that should not have existed, the drumbeat of a heavy cavalry charge. Baldwin halted, dismounted with effort, and prayed before the cross. Knights wept, not from weakness, but from acceptance. Then he mounted again, and the order was simple: strike. A Frankish knight in full gallop is kinetic violence. Horse, rider, mail, and lance turning speed into a point of steel. The first impact shattered Saladin's rear like glass. The Crusader wedge kept moving, because stopping meant being swallowed. In the crush, the Sultan's own camp was nearly taken, his standard threatened, his men suddenly fighting to survive the next breath. Elite guards rallied long enough to cut a gap for Saladin to escape, and he fled with a handful of companions, leaving tents, treasure, and wounded behind. What began as battle became rout, and rout is where medieval killing explodes. Frankish horsemen pursued until dusk, while scattered groups of Ayyubid soldiers ran into the countryside without water, without direction, and often without armor. Later accounts speak of storms and freezing rain turning retreat into a nightmare march across Sinai. Casualty figures are debated, but the collapse in morale was real and immediate. Ibn al-Athir, Ernul. Jerusalem celebrated as if heaven had intervened. Baldwin returned not as a dying embarrassment but as a savior, and Europe heard the story as a miracle. Yet miracles have invoices. The forced march, the heat, the hours in armor, the stress of command, everything accelerated the disease eating him from within. Over the next years his body failed in public. Numb hands, ruined feet, failing eyes, a king increasingly carried rather than riding. Still he ruled, and when Saladin tested the kingdom again, the mere rumor of Baldwin's presence at Carrick in 1183 helped check the siege. William of Tyre, later continuations. The kingdom, however, wasted the time he bought. As Baldwin weakened, courtiers and barons fought over succession, and reckless leaders provoked Saladin with raids and broken truces. Baldwin died in 1185 at 24, and within 2 years the Crusader army marched into disaster at Hattin. There the true cross was captured, the military orders were slaughtered, and the road to Jerusalem opened. On October 2, 1187, the city surrendered to Saladin, who, in a striking contrast to 1099, allowed ransoms and negotiated departures rather than unleashing a massacre. Ibn Alathir, Jonathan Phillips, Holy Warriors. So why does Montgisard still hit like a punch? Because it is the rare moment when a human being refuses the math of his own life. Baldwin did not win because he had more men, better weapons, or a healthier body. He won because he moved faster than fear and because his enemy could not imagine a doomed teenager choosing attack over survival. We all face our own dust cloud on the horizon: illness, debt, grief, a dream everyone calls impossible. Baldwin's story does not promise happy endings. It offers something harder, the courage to saddle up anyway. If this story gave you something, subscribe and write in the comments. What is your Montgisard right now, and what odds are you facing? Next we will follow Saladin's long game, and the warrior monks of the Templars who formed Baldwin's spearhead. Key details come from William of Tyre, the Ernul tradition, and Ibn Alathir. Remember, history is not distant, it is a mirror held to us today. And if you want more, stay tuned here.